Hi, I'm Kara, life coach, wife, and mom to 4 incredible and unique children. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and confidence that once felt so lacking. I created the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves feeling trapped and with no one who really understands. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle your ability to dream. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you are a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello and welcome back to the Special Needs Mom podcast. Today we have a very special guest. Her name is Jennifer Deis. And what's fun about that is this relationship is one that I've actually probably had longer than most relationships in my life. She was my childhood best friend, and we lost touch along the years. However, one of the gifts with my son's recent health challenges was that she and I reconnected. And so it's really kind of fun to see the worlds colliding, to see the person who I had so much fun with and we laughed so much together as children to come together as adults and adults that happen to have children with special needs. And so she will make you laugh as well. I can guarantee that. And she just shares her experience. She really actually comes to the call with a desire to really kind of preach in a loving way, to listen to our own instincts. And her foundation of really learning to listen comes as she is a lactation consultant. And so I feel like she shares in the episode that really, her job was to teach women to listen to their own instincts. And so she talks about her journey of discovery, of listening to her own instincts in her motherhood journey, and as it related to advocating and getting her child what he needed. And so she shares the good and the bad and the ugly as far as things that might still feel a little messy as far as what it took to get her child what he needed. So welcome to this conversation. It's very much like having a coffee with two very old friends that have had a lot of history together. And you'll hear about my junior high days, which I think will make you laugh. And again, they still make my hands sweat. So welcome to this episode and welcome, Jennifer. If you all can welcome the one, the only Jen. Welcome to the show.
Finally getting the welcoming that I've craved for 42 years. So thank you for that.
Well, so y'all just heard me in the introduction that this podcast was birthed out of junior high. And so Jen, and I actually always call you Jennifer. I don't know why I switched to Jen now, but I still call you Jennifer. That's just how I still call you. We're like best friends all through junior high. And I feel like I still have this very vivid memory of being at a junior high dance where you were neighbors with Ryan Calderon. And I had this little crush on Ryan.
Oh,
for like
who didn't?
And he asked me to dance. And I remember afterwards, somehow I got wind that he was like, wow, her heartbeat was like a little rabbit.
Oh my gosh, I remember this.
And I was
He told me, I remember.
I'm like sweaty right now just thinking about it.
Oh my gosh. I remember he did say something like your heart was, I still talk to him, right?
No, but you can tell him to listen to this episode. It'd be very funny. No, you do. That's really fun.
Well, I'm still friends with him on IG, and then occasionally we'll chit chat back and forth. And yeah, funny story. He ended up in like the Orange County area with somebody that I went to high school with in San Bernardino, and they're really good friends. and they both knew me, and they randomly met at a bar, and somehow my name came up.
Oh, isn't that a thrill?
What? Wouldn't you like to be a fly on the wall there?
Well, would have been fun. Okay, so clearly you guys, we have some history. And then some of the history is that there wasn't history for a while there. We did not have a breakup, but we definitely lost connection. And so we rekindled. She was the angel holding the coffee and the sandwiches and the cookies for the last hospital trip.
Yeah.
She offered kindly to bring us stuff. And y'all know my MO, when people say, "Can I bring you something?" I say yes, typically, right? I mean, not, you get the point. The idea is I just really try to yes when people offer to support us. And so we rekindled our relationship, our friendship, our connection. And it's just a very, very fun thing. So little did I know that she also is a parent of a child with special needs. And so when I did the casting call for let's have some more guests on the show, she said, "Hey, I'll do it. I'll jump in." And
Yep,
so
I did.
I want to hear a little bit about how you identify as a special needs mom. Like, at what point did you say, wow, like I'm parenting somebody that has needs beyond what I realized, or maybe what some of your other children might need? Like, what was that for you? Like when you kind of had that realization?
I think the reason why I volunteered to do it was because I came at it at a different way, because my son was writing his name when he was 3 years old. So, his granted, I mean, it was preschool, but still the teacher was like, "I've never had a 3-year-old write their name." And, he's so advanced. And so I just, in my head, he's advanced, he's smart, and he spoke young, he walked young, he met all of his milestones way early. So when he started kindergarten, his teacher had a lot of personal issues that year. And so he didn't really have a teacher. She refused to take a leave. So we just had a bunch of substitutes. And there were several days where a sub didn't even show up.
And in kindergarten, that's kind of an issue.
It was bad. I mean, it was so bad. They literally would split up the class, 5 kids, and send them to the different classrooms. It was bad. It got to the point where I would just start bringing him home with me because it wasn't worth keeping him in these other classrooms to just be babysat. So anyways, the teacher came back the last month of school. She said she did an assessment on all the kiddos, and Enzo was above grade level and went into first grade. So when he got into first grade, his teacher put him with, the kiddos that were assessed above grade level. Well, within a month or so, she immediately noticed that something was wrong, something was off. And she spoke to me, and I was like, well, no, he's advanced. He's above grade level. So it took me probably 6 months longer than it needed to for me to get on board. And once I was on board, I was like, oh, wow, yeah, this is a problem. I also had a surprise newborn at the time. So I was definitely like stretched. When you go to the doctors, for an example, or school, you put your trust in them, their expertise, what they know. So, when we started our first SST meeting at his first elementary school down in Ocean Beach, they just said, we're going to get him on track. Everything's going to be great. And inside, my mom instincts were screaming, this is not right. But I talked myself out of it because what do I know? I'm not a teacher. To be honest, I don't even really like kids. I like mine, but I definitely don't want to be a teacher. I don't know enough about this to know. So we had a few more meetings, and he always seemed to make enough of a jump to just barely kind of make it. And it was so frustrating because we knew that he needed help. And down in Ocean Beach, there's always a child that needs more. So at one point, the principal just said to me, your son has a stable home and stable, meals. Or he said something like, he knows where all of his meals are coming from. He'll be fine. I just didn't understand what that had to do with his education. And then I started getting really angry, and I was arguing a lot with the principal. And then I thought, this is not getting me anywhere. It's certainly not helping my son. The only thing was doing was upsetting me, because at the end of the day, they didn't really care. So yeah, we literally packed up and moved to Poway. And within 3 months, we had an IEP in place. But what was so hard for me, and I still cry that I wasted years, is I was a lactation, technically I'm still licensed. I'm a lactation consultant. And one of the things I always told moms is, your mommy instincts, follow them. They will guide you. They will keep you where you need to be with your babies. And if your mommy instincts are telling you something and the doctors are telling you something different, listen to your mommy instincts. This is your child. You spend more time with them than anyone else. Like, you have to be their advocate. And, I definitely was not sleeping on it, but for some reason, I just let these people convince me that I was wrong and they knew better. And at one point, they told me to go to his doctor and get him diagnosed with ADHD, because that was how we could get him with an education program. So it turns out he has been diagnosed with dyslexia and orthographic processing disorder. And I mean, he's doing amazing now. The confidence in him is night and day. But for me, it's like, I feel like as women, we're trained to apologize when we get out of line, or, when we yell, or, get angry in public, then we're a Karen or anything else. You know what I mean, though? Like, if you get
pop
crazy,
culture,
yes, like, but why can't you be a mama bear, like fighting for your kid? At the end of the day, I've been there since, February 21st, 2011 at 8:08 in the morning. I didn't see any of you teachers or principal there. I mean, I didn't. Nor were you there when he didn't sleep for a year. I was there. So granted, I was really tired, so they could have been there, but there's no pictures or video proof. So I'm going to say no. But, I just think that needs to be done away with. Like, I think that we need to be respected as advocates for them. And we know what we're doing. I don't care if I'm a stay-at-home mom and I haven't worked. I don't care if I'm a high school dropout or didn't graduate college or whatever the case may be. I don't care. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I can't help but notice that we're recording this episode on March 8th, that I think it's International. What is it? Is it Women's
International Women's Day is today.
Okay. Yeah. I was like, I feel like I was trying to separate the marches that happen sometimes and the actual day, which I was like, and actually when it's one of my children's birthdays today, I'm like, how cool is it that one of my children was born on International Women's Day? I'm very aligned with you in questioning like how women are mislabeled when they operate in ways that might be loud or might be like outside of the social norm for what women are
They're
expected
so
to be.
emotional. They're probably on their period. You know what I mean? Like, oh, they're probably PMSing. Yes, they're crazy. No, I'm not. Like, and even if I don't give a crap, I probably still act like this. This is my child. Like, I need him. And every year that goes by, his confidence level is just plummeting. And I can see him, just going downhill. And, when they get older, they're more aware of their surroundings and what other kids notice. And he knew that other kids knew that he wasn't able to finish his work and that he was timing out of tests on the computer, and the teachers were constantly having to come over and restart his tests. And if someone laughed at him, that was it. He was done. He was shutting down, and he wasn't even going to try again. So,
it's an interesting phase, I think, because both of our boys are boys that have special needs. They're quite close in age. He's in 6th or 7th grade? 7th, 6th,
5th. He just turned 11.
Oh yeah, he looks
yeah.
older than he is. Okay,
he's huge. He's a big.
He
kid.
does look. He's a big kid. He's a big boy. I have a big boy too. Yeah. So actually this is coming up with this age group. I think we just had Levi's annual IEP meeting, and I was going to say his caretakers. No, they're not caretakers. That his people that support him at school were saying that they're noticing that he is really wanting to do what the rest of the class does. Like he's choosing not to use some of his available supports, his assistive technology, because he's noticing that other people aren't using it. And I thought it's interesting because I don't get to have that view at home, right? He, doesn't really care what his brothers are doing, or maybe he does, but having those.
But he doesn't care what they think of him and what he's doing to get his homework done. Like Enzo uses the speech to text.
Yeah. Exactly. And so I thought it was interesting because it was really the first time, or even this year actually is the first year that, so Levi wears an SMO, which is similar to an AFO. It's a little bit smaller. So it's like a foot. You visually can see that he has something on his foot that is not a shoe. And so I think it looks really cool, but I can see how maybe if you were in 7th grade, maybe you wouldn't think that all the cool kids are going to wear an SMO. And he had some social resistance. Like he wanted to look cool. And I thought, well, I mean, I definitely wanted to look cool. I mean, listen, I did get Ryan Calderon to ask me to dance, but I was by no means a cool kid. But, we all have that desire.
Excuse me. We hung out. You were super cool. Granted, I was in band, but right. Still.
I know. I was singing about your French horn the other day. I was like, that is an interesting choice of an instrument. How did you choose that? She played the French horn.
Who does that? Why?
I don't know.
You know why? Because I'm an idiot. A. B. I am an Aquarius through and through. I have to beat to my own drummer, and it's really to my detriment, if I'm honest. So nobody was playing the French horn. I couldn't do the flute or the clarinet because a bunch of people were doing that. And I had to do something different.
Oh, I see.
So
I see.
I not only picked the lamest instrument, no offense to anyone who plays or loves the French horn. It was just not for me. Yeah. What are you going to do?
I want to bring you back though, to, I love what you said about, as a lactation consultant, it's all about instinct. And so that is an interesting really well, and because I can look back at times where instinctually I knew something didn't fit right. I couldn't have said something was wrong, but something felt off. That's all it was. Right. Something felt off. And I asked about it to the doctors, and I got an answer that was like, we're fine. We're on the charts. So it was enough for me to say, to be appeased and be okay with it. And so kind of turning back to you, I wonder if, and this probably happened in both of our cases, that it was easy to accept the answer of he's fine, he's gonna be okay, because it's what we wanted to believe was true. Do you think that that was part of kind of what happened for you when you spoke up? You got affirmation that everything was okay, even though you kind of knew it wasn't. What do you think was happening for you?
Well, of course, nobody wants to hear that anything is wrong with their kiddo. I worked in healthcare long enough to know that, like, he wasn't autistic. He wasn't on the spectrum. He didn't have Asperger's. You know what I mean? I knew, and if he had, we would have dealt with it, of course. But I knew it was a learning situation. And you very well could be right. There was definitely a part of me that thought he could be being lazy, like I can very well be lazy. If I don't feel like doing things, I will find any excuse not to do them. And then also I was like, well, he didn't have a kindergarten teacher. So of course he's behind. He didn't have a teacher for a year, right? So there was kind of me also in my head blaming the kindergarten teacher. It wasn't until his first grade teacher pulled me aside when he was in second grade and was like, Jen, everybody who was behind in that class is now at grade level. So we should probably stop. And I was like, okay, all right, fair enough. You're right. And it was at that point where I was like, okay. And, everything was a knockdown, drag out fight. Homework would be tears, crying. I mean, I have videos of him throwing things, it was so hard. And now looking back, he didn't have the words, I think, to articulate what he was trying to explain. And I think that now when he's having a really hard time getting his point across, he just gets mad, or if I'm not understanding what he's saying. It's not that like that happens all the time. That's pretty rare now. He still has like behavioral issues as far as, anger stuff. I don't know. But yes, to answer your question in a very long way, yes. And also, I trusted them. They were doing the assessments, they were doing the testing. And one of his biggest issues now is his handwriting. They tested him for OT down in Ocean Beach. Everything's great. Everything's great. Perfect. No issues there. Perfect. OT up here. He has OT for at least the next 3 years. Minimum.
So how did you know? Because I feel like, okay, I think there's a saying of like, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so like you being that, I know you do have a daughter that's a couple years older than he is. So obviously you had her paving the way, but I think a lot of it can be like, you don't know what you don't know. And so like, how did you know that there was a missing when it came to the support that he was getting at school?
What I knew was this. I knew that where he was at, they were just going to keep putting him up. They were going to just keep putting him to the next grade level because they don't hold kids back now. It's just not anything that they do. And especially, I mean, this, you have a big child. They do not do it for children who are above the average size of the grade level. So because Enzo's always been the tallest or the second or third tallest of his grade level, they won't consider them because, it's too detrimental to them if they're held back because they'll be so much larger. I had a huge concern over that as well. My concern was once you leave elementary school down there, it was like not a great school and then a worse school and then high school was decent. And I felt like and I say this and people probably think I'm crazy, but I felt like he was drowning and I didn't see a way to get him out of it. And I just felt like every year he was going further and further below the water. And he was finishing up second grade, and elementary schools only go to fourth grade down there. And I thought, when he goes to fifth and sixth, which is like the middle school there, he's not going to make it. That's when they're going to hold him back. It's not going to work. And it just felt like there was always somebody who needed more than him, who was always going to come before him. And I needed him to be the priority. And so I figured, where was that going to happen? And it was Poway. And it was horrible. Like, we don't necessarily like living here, but the schools are great. We love living here for him. Like, he's doing great. His confidence is way up. He's made such great improvements. He's reading on his own now. I don't know if he loves to read, but he'll do it. He's getting his work done on his own. It's not a huge fight. So it was worth it. He would have never had that down there.
I want to give people perspective of, like, so basically, if you're not from the San Diego area, she moved from you were like a couple blocks from the beach, right? So very coastal community, right, to Poway, which is, I don't want to say rural, but it's like, it's hot. It's real hot.
Oh God,
and I would
miserable.
say, like, the average medium home price of Poway, what is it, like $2 million? I don't know.
Which we do not live in a home. We live in a condo. So don't get it twisted. We are not those people. Yeah.
You intentionally moved to an area where you could access the best of what was available for your son.
Yes.
And it came with some sacrifices, in the sense of, like, you don't live by the beach anymore. You live where it's very hot. And yes.
Like, we didn't have an AC before. We lived in a very, like, hippie town, which is why a lot of the kids were considered homeless, because, they lived in motorhomes or tiny homes or whatever, or they lived in hotels. So there's just a huge, like, transient population down there. The whole families would come in for the free breakfast. I mean, for them to be like, listen, he knows where his next meal is coming from. He'll be fine. Like, you need to figure this out on your own.
Yeah. So I think that this is an interesting dynamic. I think that in your case, basically what was happening is that the principal, it sounds like he was overwhelmed, or maybe even just felt limited in what he could offer based on all of the other challenges he had.
I honestly think that he's an idiot. I think he's narcissistic. Well, he lives in Del Mar, but works in Ocean Beach.
So for those of you who don't know, that like, there's a Del Mar is the Poway version of the beach.
Yeah, right.
No, but there's a lot of lovely people in Del Mar. I will say that.
There is. And it's a beautiful area to live. But, like, you're basically, on the beach, and it's, twice as expensive as Poway. But here he is, like, oh, I'm Ocean Beach through and through. When you do have lower income students and you cater to them, your school gets more funding. And so, of course, it would make more sense for him to want to focus on those programs, because you get more funding if you focus on the lower income students. Yeah. And that's just where his focus was.
Do you think he didn't know how to help you, or that he didn't?
Oh, I don't think he knew how. I don't think he knew how. And I don't think he necessarily wanted to. I truly believe, because he not only told me, but he told quite a few moms who, had a stable home, that we should go to our own doctors and get our children assessed there, get them a diagnosis, bring it to him, and then he'll get them an IEP.
Which, for those of you that haven't followed this process yet, there's a very clear and protective law in place requiring schools to follow a procedure so that parents don't have to go to a private doctor to get their children the education that they are entitled to, right? Like, this is a right that we have as, is it Americans?
Taxpayers.
Taxpayers, that's better. Like, I was like, I don't know how we say this. Taxpayers, thank you. Okay, so...
well, as citizens, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'd asked if you thought he knew how to help you, because I think what happens a lot is we as moms encounter somebody that says some version of it's not possible, or I can't, or I won't. And that's what's in the way of us getting what we want for our child, right? So whether it's scheduling a surgery, whether it's getting education in place, whatever the thing is. And so I think what happens is that we have options as moms of like how we be in that situation. Some of us would just take the answer and say, oh, sorry, it's not possible. But I think one of my sayings is motherhood is leadership. And so I think in that case, what I mean by that is like leadership is believing in the possibility and like then creating it, right? And so this principle was the thing in the way of you getting the education for your child. And I think actually it's a really beautiful snapshot of you literally not being stopped at finding what you thought was best for your son, right? So you moved, you sold your house and you moved so that you could get what you thought would be helpful to him. Obviously, it wasn't a guarantee, right? You didn't have the IEP in place when you moved. Like you didn't know definitively, but you were going on your leading. And it sounds like you very much were listening to your instinct in as far as finding him a better place for him to continue to develop. So I guess I just want to highlight the idea that we're going to constantly come up against people that say no, people that don't know how, and that maybe don't even want to help. And I think this is the opportunity where we can, like, I think, be that mama bear, which doesn't have to look ferocious and bite people. It can look like an unwavering stand and saying, I will figure out how. Right. And I think you're really great at this.
Well, I mean, and that's kind of the reason why I volunteered is of course, like I will yell and scream at people if necessary, but that's never a good look. So although I think that, the principal at OB, I don't think that he's right for that job. I don't think that he should be in it. I would hate to say he's a bad person because I know a lot of people really like him, but I don't think anyone needs to get to the point, where you're angry because you're feeling like you're in a war with someone. And the other thing too is, as moms, we second guess ourselves all the time. And, the same thing is said with, like I said, we're so scared of coming off as emotional or crazy or something else that oftentimes we just smile and nod. Or if we do say something and we get a look like, oh, wow, then we apologize. And I don't think that we should do that. I mean, the whole purpose of these meetings and appointments or whatever the case may be is for our kids. So we're advocating for them. And I'm to the point now where I don't care what anybody thinks of me, but I don't want to react like a crazy person anymore. But hear me, I will. I don't want anything. I've gone soft. I have not. I will. But I don't want to. But I also want to be respected. And I want every mom, when you have a child, whether that is through adoption, surrogacy, someone left it on your door, you gave birth, whatever the case may be, that is your baby, that is your world, that is literally your life outside of your body, right? Like that's your heart, that's just walking around. If you sense something is wrong, listen to yourself because you're right. You're right. You may not be right about how severe it is or what exactly is wrong, but if something is off, something is off, period.
Yeah. So what did you learn about yourself in the transition or in the journey of having the advanced child to where you're at today? What has this helped you see differently?
I think for me. It's really just proved to me that I'm always right. No, just kidding. I just want to really listen to my gut. I think we talk ourselves out of our instincts or our intuition or whatever may be because, we think, I mean, I know I'm an overthinker. So I'm like, okay, well, if I do this, then what could happen with XYZ or whatever the case may be. And I just don't think that that's necessary. I think that you can advocate for your child in a way that, doesn't make you come across as a crazy person. When this all happened years ago, I felt like yelling and screaming was the only way they were going to hear me, but that's not true.
Well, the way I would break it down is recognize that your yelling and screaming was probably a reaction to what you were feeling. And my guess is that you were feeling, well, what were you feeling? If there was like the top feelings that you were feeling at that time, what were they?
I felt like a failure. I was failing my son. You can see changes in your children, when they're minute. I mean, when your kids come home from school, you can tell when they've had a bad day. And he was having a lot of bad days, a lot of bad days. Here's this happy kid, always smiling. And to get him to go to school was a knockdown, drag out fight. I just felt like I had failed him and I didn't know how to fix it.
Yeah. So you can see your reaction to feeling like a failure and probably feeling maybe hopeless. I'll put this in for you, like a little like frustration, like probably anger of not like this guy not hearing you. Right. So like probably what you look back at, you reacted to the emotions that you had. And so I think if you look at yourself now, fast forward, I think what we see here is likely a reaction to those feelings that, most of us have these feelings. We don't want to feel them. And so instead, what we do is react to them. So that prevents is actually, it prevents the emotion feeling like working its way through us and just being there. And oftentimes this is happening subconsciously. We're not aware that we are doing this. But I think what the flag is for us is that we don't feel good afterwards. We don't feel like, wow, that felt so relieving that I yelled at that person. Like there's a certain amount of power in it. So it's like what I like to call it is like dirty power, where it's like it wasn't nothing. Like it did get you a response.
It feels good at the time.
It sometimes feels relieving at the time. It's relieving. There's still something underneath. And so I'd say probably through the years of evolution, as you first accepted what was happening for your child, right? And so firstly, accepting that actually you weren't failing him. He just has this thing, right? And it has nothing to do with what you did or didn't do. And yeah, there was some things you wanted to do to support him differently. So my guess is that now you have a different being about it, a different energy, and you are probably much less reactive. Like you've given yourself a foundation of like support. You have a supportive team around you, and it's changed your relationship to like what we'll call the problem of him, having the challenges that he did. So I don't know. Does that sound like an accurate breakdown of what the shift might be?
Yes, absolutely. And I think too, like as moms, just over time, I think your confidence grows and you gain confidence, but you also gain that like assuredness. I'm Enzo's mom. I know what's going on and we got this, But I will say nothing was resolved when we moved to Poway as far as getting him diagnosed. But within moving here, I didn't even have time to bring up the IEP because I wanted him to start school. And then I had made an appointment with his teacher like a month down because she said, I hadn't mentioned anything. I said, I just would like to have a meeting with you to go over his previous And she has said, well, let's wait a few weeks because I want to get settled in school and get to know him, because he wasn't at that school last year, for her to ask a different teacher. I said, fine. She contacted me within a week and a half and said, I know you wanted to have a meeting, but can you just give me a little bit of background? I did. She immediately scheduled an SST, which is the kickoff to a potential IEP getting there. And the testing started the following week with him. And we had an IEP in place and going by the end of the year. And there was no yelling, screaming, no arguing. It was just a smooth process. And I think that's the difference too between, maybe a district or a school that knows what they're doing versus one that doesn't, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. It does make sense. But I also can't help but wonder is that you also brought a different belief to that school because you had done research and you believed that school was going to be able to provide for your child. And so you went into those meetings thinking they're going to help Enzo, they're going to be better, they're going to do all these things. And so I don't want to discount, yes, they're an awesome school, but I don't want to discount that that's the only thing that was different. I think also you did bring your outside perspective to that, and those are the results that you created. So that is a piece that sometimes we look over, right? We don't realize, oh, there was that other thing that we actually brought a different energy to that as well.
Well, yeah, and 2 years of being in what I call the spin cycle or the rinse and repeat, just the same thing over and over again. So yeah, I definitely can see that. And, that is one thing about me. I am always open to taking a new look at things, because oftentimes people can see things from the outside better than you can from the inside. So yeah, you're probably right. When we moved here, even though we had a ton of problems when we bought our place, that was one thing that I had confidence in. And maybe one of the reasons I had confidence in, because there was no other options. That was it. It had to work, or that was it. It had to work, So there is just one thing I really, that dirty power, that I regret it for myself. I don't care how I made anyone else feel. I mean, other than my son, if he was upset about it, not that I yelled at anyone in front of him. They certainly didn't care how I felt, but I cared that I was upset about it, because I don't want to be ugly to people. That's not my goal.
Yeah, I think anger is something that I think, especially as moms, we're well acquainted with. And most of us were not well acquainted. I mean, just like we were talking earlier, being a woman that's angry, I think that there's a lot of confusion on how you're supposed to be and then how you actually feel. And so I just want to put that in there that all of it is to be aware of what feels good for you, right? I love how you're I don't really care about them. I care about Enzo, but it didn't feel good for you. And that's where I say, oh, good data point, take note. Then what would feel good for you? And when you identify how you actually want to feel, what it feels like to be more authentically you, then that gives you the trajectory point. Okay, that's who I want to be. And so then you can kind of have a completely different conversation that's not based out of shame or guilt or oh my gosh, I can't believe I yelled at them again. But really kind of looking at okay, well, again, grace and compassion, and then looking at kind of who you want to be and connect yourself to that you. We all have experiences where we're we feel the most us, where we feel the most connected and authentic. And I think that feels good. It feels good to be who we are in our essence. And nobody is there all the time. So I think it's just kind of like, for me, it's like my lifelong curiosity is how to get more and more connected to being who I authentically am.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the goal. And I think too that it's normal to go through all those emotions when you're initially trying to get your child diagnosed with something. But when going through that process, I don't think that you should allow the way other people are behaving to change you at your core level, because it was not a great experience by any means, obviously, but that's something that I think about and I still am like ashamed of. Like I said, for myself, I wish someone had said to me, take a step back and don't do that, because that's not something, you do, because that's the only part of it that I wish I could change. And I wish I could have throat punched the principal before we moved. But, my
But
niece does go to that school, and I picked her up twice, and I've circled. I've seen him twice since then. I'm not even kidding you. This man literally about faces and speed walks away from me. So I do find pleasure in that.
I love it. Any other thoughts or remarks as we kind of round out the show?
I don't think so.
I would love to have more days where we reminisce the French horn. And we didn't even get to start talking about my days as a flag girl. We did not even get into that. But don't worry, guys. I wasn't actually good enough to do the actual flags. So they let me carry the banner, and I walked in front of the flags. So maybe I'll dig up some pictures on that.
Banner. So
I did. And I had to turn my head to the beat.
That banner.
I was the tallest, at least. So I got to go in the middle, me next to Nikki Parton. So anyhow, so a lot of fun times we had here, but thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey and your story. It was really fun.
Anytime. Thank you for having me.